Let's continue talking about our takedown system now by looking at our collar drag. So previously we've looked at 3 different takedowns: the double leg, the single leg, and our body lock, which saw us getting to our opponent's back and then returning their hips to the mat in order to start to attack their back. Now we're going to be looking at the collar drag, which is going to be an excellent position to set up these different takedowns that we can start to apply to a system. So I'm going to demonstrate the collar drag, but we're going to start the collar drag from the guard first. But let's look at the whole thing from the beginning so that we can see what we're going to be leading up to. Here we go. So the collar drag itself is not necessarily a takedown. The collar drag is inducing a broken alignment on our opponent so that we can then wrestle up into various takedowns. Now, to start with our collar drag, we're actually going to begin from the guard position. You can do the collar drag from the seated guard. However, this is just going to be a good way for us to learn the primary movements that will then transition to our standing collar drag. So we're going to be starting from just a seated guard position here with my opponent on their knees. From this position, we're just going to work on the actual collar drag mechanics. So I'm going to be looking to utilize a cross collar grip here. The cross collar grip is very important in the collar drag because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to internally rotate my opponent's shoulder while breaking their posture and pulling them past me. If I go for the same side collar grip, that's not going to give me the same effect because I'm going to be pulling him more straight forward and I haven't actually created internal rotation on his shoulders. So we're going to be starting with a collar grip with our right hand. Generally, we're going to use our dominant hand. My left hand is going to be posting out to the side. Now for our feet, we're going to have a 1 in, 1 out position. So I'm going to have an inside position with my right foot, the same as the hand that's on the collar, and my left foot's going to be on the outside position. From here, to just practice the movement, I'm going to drag my partner past me as I scoot my hips away from him. As I do this, though, I want to make sure that I'm maintaining a heavy pull on the cross collar while posting on my right elbow and my left foot. So I have opposite corners posting on the mat. If we reverse the position here, we'll see that from the other side. So again, I have my cross collar grip, 1 foot on the inside, 1 foot on the outside. I'm going to slide my hips away from him first, and as I slide away, I'm going to drag him to where I was. And immediately I'm going to look to post onto my right elbow and my left foot. For the actual drill, we're just going to have our partners center back up with us, and we'll repeat it again. Notice I haven't let go of the collar grip. I'm just going to continue working this a couple times. I drag him past, he comes back. I drag him past, and he comes back. You may have done a warm-up before where you're like scooting down the mat, and you're doing this thing where you're like scooting and pulling, right? This movement, that is kind of simulating a collar drag. So that's kind of the point of that warm-up. But I want us to start here first with understanding the mechanics of the movement on the ground, so that way it's easier to transition to the feet. Okay, guys, now that we have the mechanics of the collar drag down, let's go ahead and look at a basic entry from the feet. We're going to start this from a collar and sleeve position. So just like we've been working with our takedown system, I have our collar and sleeve grips here. Now, maybe I'm having difficulty shooting or getting in close to my opponent because they have really solid grips. So if I'm having difficulty with this, and of course that would also mean it's hard to get to the body lock. If I'm having trouble with this, we can start to look for a collar drag to induce more movement to make the takedown easier. So I'm going to start off first by breaking the collar grip that my opponent has on me. So I can either go 2-on-1 right on the wrist, or I can grab and fold the sleeve. Well, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to push the hand towards the thumb as I pull myself away from that grip. Now, when I break that collar grip, I'm going to look to immediately control it by pushing it down. This is going to make it easier for me to access the cross collar. No good opponent is going to allow us to ever get a cross collar grip on them, so I want to open up an easier access to it by pushing one of his hands away. So he only has one hand to defend the cross collar with. Okay, so again, we're going to tie up. I'm going to break the collar grip. 1, I push it down, and I get the cross collar. Now that we have the cross collar grip, I'm going to perform the exact same movement that we looked at from the guard. So I'm going to be stepping my left foot out, like I'm stepping away from him. As I step that left foot out, I'm going to slide to my right hip as I drag him to where I was. Slow motion. Here. Once I slide and I drag him down to the mat, notice how my left arm is hugging deep around his leg, like I'm doing my swing single that we worked on a couple weeks ago. So I'm basically throwing like a hook punch right behind his leg. My head is going to be driving right here into his rib cage. We're going to stop in this position, then we'll talk about finishes next. Now, as far as our body's positioning, it's crucial that we stay in good base. I don't want to go flat onto my back. This is one of the most common issues that people run into. So I grip break, and then when they go for the collar drag, they do this. This is essentially like a bad guard pull. I've pulled him into a knee cut position. So this is definitely not a very good position for me. Additionally, people can also fall onto their hip. So it almost looks like aesthetically the same, but there's a big problem. So if I fall onto my hip, so now I don't have any base that I can use to actually get up. So essentially, I've, again, pulled guard poorly, and now he ends up on top of me. So when I'm actually performing this collar drag, I want to make sure that I'm coming down into good base, so that way I'm able to wrestle up and get on top. So again, we're tied up. I'm going to do a grip break. I push that hand down to get the cross collar. I step out to the side, and now my right foot is going to go to that inside position that we looked at previously when we were working from the guard. As I slide that foot to the inside position, I'm dragging him to where I was, and I'm getting my arm wrapped all the way through his leg. My head is driving right up into his body. If we turn a little bit this way, you can notice how my legs are in a coiled S-like position. It's important that we have our legs in this position because my toes are in base, ready to drive into him, which is going to be very important for our takedown. So if we see that one more time, I'll show it from the rear. Again, we're tying up. Notice how my partner, Coach Seth, is landing in a good 4-point base position. We don't want to run into the false positive where we collar drag them and they just fall flat and just give up the guard. Again, this is not necessarily an unseen reaction, but it is something that's not necessarily a skilled reaction, right? I don't just want to practice doing this collar drag and then they just accept it and they fall over and they give me the 2 points. I want the top person, post out, catch yourself. That way the person doing the takedown has to actually finish with something. So again, be careful when you're doing the collar drag, top person, we're just going to post the hands in this 4-point position. We're going to look at our entries, or rather our finishes from this collar drag next. Okay guys, now let's talk about various ways that we can finish this collar drag. So again, the collar drag itself is not necessarily a takedown. It's a movement that forces our opponent to break their alignment, and then once we've created a broken alignment, we can come up with a variety of different takedowns. Now again, because we're creating a system of takedowns, we already have 3 great options: single leg, double leg, and the body lock. Let's look at each one, but we're going to be talking mainly about how the single leg is the easiest option. So again, we're tied up, I break the grip, and I get the cross collar. I'm going to drag him past me, and now here we are in our collar drag position. My leg is on the inside position, my legs are coiled up, I'm hooking his knee with my head, driving in towards him. And again, I'm keeping constant regulated tension on his collar so he can't posture up. So our first and most available and basic option is the single leg. His leg is right here in front of me. All I'm going to do is I'm going to start to run towards him and come up on the single leg. It doesn't have to look pretty. I'm just driving into him and pulling that leg up. As soon as I put him down on his back, I want to make sure that I can control his leg so he can't come back up for 3 seconds, and that'll get me 2 points. Again, I break the grips, and here I am in my collar drag. Use your head like a battering ram, similar to how we did with our double leg. So if my legs are not in this coiled position, it's going to be very difficult to drive into him. So I want to make sure that I'm driving off with my toes, and I'm not trying to stand up. So I'm not trying to do this. And then pick up his leg. I'm trying to keep my body relatively parallel to the floor as I run into him. I'm trying to go this way through my partner. So again, from here, I'm hooking the knee. You can grab your own collar if you'd like to, or you can just hook. I'm going to start to drive in towards as I start standing up with that leg. Just remember, it may take you a little bit of drive and running to actually run him over and come up with that single leg. And it may also see us coming up and he keeps his balance and we end up here. And now look where we are. We're in that same single leg position that we looked at a few weeks ago. So we can either finish by dragging him to his front or by running the pipe and setting him back to his bottom. Now, another option that can occur is when our opponent is a little bit quicker than us and they start to post back up. So I'm here, I hit the collar drag, he starts to come up. When he's coming up like this, I'm still gonna start to drive in. I could go for the single leg. If I'm starting to stand up and he starts to square up with me and bring this knee towards me, instead, I'm gonna go for my double leg. And start coming up to dump in with the double leg instead. Again, we're creating a system. So we have if-then statements that we're trying to fulfill. If I collar drag and I can come up first, I'm gonna go single leg. If I don't come up first and he comes up and starts to square up with me, I can go double leg. Now let's look at our last option, and that's gonna be the body lock. Anytime I'm struggling to wrestle up with this takedown on the legs, again, we wanna remember our main concept. I'm gonna start to look for center mass. So if I'm having trouble here, I can start to come up, connect to a body lock. And now that I have the connection to the body lock, if he starts to stand, now we can start to work on what we did last time. I can make our T, return it to the mat, or I can switch my base with the switch step and then take him to the mat that way as well. So our primary option will be that single leg, but I encourage you to play around with the other options too, so that way you're not too one note. If all you do is the single leg, then it's gonna be pretty easy for your partner to read that. Let's look a couple more times at this particular takedown, finishing with single leg. So we're tied up here, collar and sleeve. Break the grip, immediately control the grip by pushing down and get the cross collar. As I start to step out, I go for my collar drag. Now we're just gonna start to run them over. I just wanna start to drive into him, use the head as a battering ram to drive into his ribs, run through and get that single leg. The whole time, look how I'm driving his collar down. It's like I'm basically trying to punch his face straight down into the mat, okay? That's gonna help keep his posture broken, and as I maintain that leg, that's my lever control to shift his center of gravity and put him to the mat. I'll show one more time without talking. Here we go. And this is our basic collar drag takedown setup, finishing with a couple of different options. Single leg, if they square up, double leg, and then finally our body lock if none of those options are available.